Hi everyone, good morning and welcome back to this fall season, fall quarter. And we are going to have a good time studying modern church history. And as you see, a subtitle will be Topical Discussions. I'll try to explain what the topical discussions means. Okay, so as we begin, this will be our Lordland College fall 2021. And let me briefly introduce myself, the instructor for modern church history. My name is Hwang, and I'm a pastor. I assume most of you have taken my previous class on history. I did cover the general church history, and then last quarter we did American church history, and in that line of studying church history, we are coming to the history of modern church. See, and so most of you already know who I am, but I'm assuming there are some new students who are joining for this class. And so again, my name is Hwang, and Hwang in Chinese character, it means yellow. It's popular last name in China, I believe, and also in Korea. And it means that holiness and excellency. So to be excellent in holiness. The reason that I have that name is basically, I think it should be a Christian name, Christian meaning. My grandfather, he was an elder in a church. He came from North Korea during the Korean War, and he was converted to Christianity way before that. And then he came down to Korea and by himself, and with his son, and so he wanted me to be someone who is dedicated for the Christian cause, and I believe that he gave that name to me for that reason, to have some excellency, or to be excellent, outstanding in the holiness. So here I am, being a pastor for last almost 20 years. And I became a Christian when I was at the age of 17. And it's a long story, so I won't go into it. Anyway, I'm on 1.5 intercultural kind of generation guy, because I moved into Africa. The country is called Central African Republic, and it's still there. It's a French-speaking Africa. Used to be the colony of France. That's why they speak French as official language, and in spite of having 5 different dialogues. Different dialogues in the whole nation. Anyway, I went there when I was in junior in high school, and then did attend MK school, which is called MK is a missionary kids school, and see, that's why I was able to learn to speak English rather fluently than others of my generation. And my work, then I came back to Korea for the college education. Anyway, I'm a kind of pastor who has been focusing on the next generation, younger generation. So I haven't had any like adult congregation ministry at all so far. But I rather focus on those young people. So as I teach and disciple, that's as all the youth, like teenagers and the college and young adults. These are my main focus area. And there's a university. Actually, the University Christian Fellowship is a world famous Christian campus ministry organization. So about almost 200 years old. And that organization, I did join that university in Yonsei University in Seoul, Korea. And that's where I've been informally trained to be a Christian leader. And started with as a small group leader, then became the chapter president, and then later I became the staff worker, meaning I became a full-time person doing campus ministry. So most of the knowledge and the training that I have begun at university, and it's my like a backbone of my spirituality. So that's kind of an important thing. There are many other things that I might, explain or give information to, but with the limited time, we should rather focus on the subject itself. So that's about it for my introduction. It's a little stuffy here. So let's begin by exploring our course syllabus. And title is Modern Church History. There are many different ways doing history, but for this class, I'll do the approach of topical study. A course brief. This will be what the class is about. Okay, total of 10 weeks, virtual classes, and each class is running a couple hours, and we'll cover the selected developments of the global church history. So we're not just dealing with the American church history or particular history of some congregation, denomination, but a whole global church history. But when we say global church history, it's mainly American church, and then how that American church is interacting with some other churches. It's still the case. But I'm projecting and foreseeing that that will be the case in the latter part of the 21st century, if it doesn't end with the second coming of Jesus Christ. Assuming that it will continue until the latter half of 21st century, that will be quite different story. The so-called third third world churches, they'll be the leading force in church history. But until now, which is 2021, we're still under the influence of a Western church, especially the American church. And so that's going to be the kind of direction that we are going. And since 1900 up to today, so we'll cover about 100 little plus years, 110, 120 years. Because most recent development in the church, we could look at it, but it is very difficult to have some historical significance out of most current happenings. And that's usually with other histories as well. It takes us some time to kind of go back and review what had happened from the point of present. So the most recent happenings that happened like last decade will be difficult to assess in terms of history. So basically we are covering about 1 century, 20th century happenings in the global church. So that's what we are aiming at. And then the class will examine the overall picture of the chronology, meaning the timeline, what happened after a certain year, and then again another year, and so on. So there are some major events and major characters, following that timeline. We will do that, but we will rather focus more on the critical reviews of the relevant topics. That's the main thing. Critical review of the relevant topics or significant topics. When it is relevant, that means it means something to us today, as Christians today. So when it is relevant, we kind of presume that it would be very significant, important. So relevant is rather a bigger term than significant. Anyway, so relevant topics that had affected the church and the world. There's things that kind of affects us, have implications. And church and the world. You need to remember the concept of the church and the world. It kind of goes together. It's like a two sides of coin. You cannot have coin without one side or the other side. You need both to be a valid coin of value. So it's the same thing. Church and the world, it goes together. So when we are looking at a church history, it means that we are going to look at not only the church history, but the world. Because a church does not exist without the world. And the world today, as we see, as we read the history, does not exist without church. So it goes hand in hand together, rather than following the mere timeline. So we'll look at the timeline, but we rather focus on those topics. That's how we are going to approach modern church history in this particular class. I'm not saying this is the best way to do any history, but for us in this particular class, we will focus on those things, the relevant topics. So we'll look at each topics that have importance to our understanding of church today, and how are we going to do the church in the future. As the church struggles to establish the kingdom of God on earth and its people, and prepares the second coming of the Messiah. So the main thrust of doing a church history should focus its ultimate goal, the final end, course objectives. At the end of this particular course, the modern church history, we expect students, number one, to comprehend significance of those historical events and characters who had changed the modern church or shaped modern church since the beginning of the 20th century to the present. So we want you to have that, this understanding about the significance of each event, major events, and the characters. Number two, students should be able to understand major topics and its implications and how the church dealt with them, and eventually had affected shaping of the modern human existence during the period. Meaning, the church, whether it's big or small, it should influence its surroundings, the communities, the world that the church is in. So the one very valid and key measurement of understanding a church history is going to be, and is always has been, that how church had influenced its surroundings, people, and the culture and the context. So it can and it should, the world should accommodate or come to at least the close approximity of God's plan. So in more simple words, the church should influence the world so world become a better place to live for us human beings, as God had designed it to be. So that's what it is. Number three, students, when you have finished this class, you should be able to understand the mechanics and dynamics of how the church and the world had created mutual interactions during the period to bring the goodness among the whole human generation. So that's the ultimate measurement for us doing a church history. So you should be able to understand what the church is, how it is like, how it had developed, and how the church had influenced or interacted with the world to bring the better human existence. There are a couple relevant readings that I suggest, which is in your book, and the primary text would be, it's not so difficult to read. This is an easy to read one. And it's 5th edition. There are 4 editions before this, but most recent, 2021. version of the book is by Bruce Shelley, and it's titled Church History in Plain Language. Yeah, it's easy to read, and it's not for the theologians, or it's not for the particular historians. It's for the common people like us. So it's written in very easy common language. Then secondary text is it's a little more academic, and it's written by Justo Gonzalez, one of the Latin descent, I believe. And it is written, the title is The Story of Christianity, and it's many large volumes, and volume 7 in particular, that set of the history books. Volume 7 said The Reformation to the Present Day. So that book covers from the Reformation in Europe to present, but you can read, if you are really interested, you can read 20th century on, and probably want to read the 19th century portion as well, because knowing the 19th century history will help you understand 20th century church history as well. Then there are some of other resources. These are the very academic, writings in the dictionary. It says a dictionary, but it basically covers a topical. That's the reason we use this as a reference books or resources, are because these dictionaries are the ones that approach the kind of topical approach of the subjects that we are studying. And each the New International Dictionary of the Christian Church, which is very fine book to have on your shelf. An Oxford Dictionary of the Christian Church, and then Dictionary of the Christianity in America. These are very good resources for this particular classes. And now here comes the little house chores. If you are going to be with us in this modern church history offered by the Lordland College, you need to at least do these to pass this class. Number one, your virtual attendance. Since we are doing it, on video format until this coronavirus thing is over, each attendance to the class will count 3% of your grade, total 100%. And so we have 10 weeks class, and each will count 3%, and it comes to the 30%. So your attendance alone will earn you 30% or third of the total grade. Number two, assignment number 2 will be 10 key points summary on each class. The reason that I'm doing this instead of the quiz we used to do in the classroom, because we are not able to, I'm not able to offer the quiz. If you remember, if you're one of my students, you remember that each quiz would have usually had 10 questions, right? Same thing. So you'll just summarize 10 key points or key elements from each class, each week. And so that paper is just one page. It will be one page. You don't want to write 10 points, in 10-page writing. No, just one page, and number 1 to 10, and just summarize what you have learned during that class. And without paying the attention, actually, seeing the video, the virtual class, you're not able to do this, right? And if I find anything that's the exact copy of 2 students or more, then I'll just grade 0 on all of them. So don't share your key points with the other students. That's kind of cheating to my standard. You want to use your own language. Your English doesn't need to be excellent, but at least need to make a sense. But each paper, that's 3% again. So you have 10 papers, summary papers for each class, which comes out 30% total. Then number 3 is the major one. It's a 1 term paper. Term paper is usually 10 to 15 page double space writing on the particular topic, and it's little more than a report on a topic. You just summarize. You don't need to discuss or debate or throw your own opinion on the report paper. Usually professors do not require that on the report paper, even though it's nice to have your own perspective and opinion in any paper that you're writing. That will be plus if you're writing the report. But this term paper, it does require your own perspective, debate or discussion, or thesis. You need to write a thesis on this term paper, what you are saying. And then you need to have the support for your claim or your thesis or what you want to say. So it basically has a thesis and the support or proof, and then a conclusion. So basically the introduction, the main body, and the conclusion, and then it's a rather formal discussion paper. And it's gonna count you 40%. So say you did make a attendance of 30% and then wrote a term paper, and I'm gonna grade the term paper, but I don't think anyone's gonna get 40% total. It has to be perfect to get the 40%. So if you just did the attendance and the 10 points paper, you already earned 60%. So my grading scale, okay, let me explain the term paper a little further before telling you the grade scale. Students are required to submit a critical discussion. See, it's a critical discussion term paper on one of the class topics by the end of last class. If you look at your workbook that has been provided, there list like 12 topics that we are going to cover. And out of those topics that you are going to choose one of them that you like or you want to write on. So by the end of last class, you need to submit that. And any paper submitted late will have 10% of total grade points decrease, which means 10%, it's not 10% out of 40%, but each day if you submit it the next day, it means that you only get 30% of the total grade even if you wrote the perfect paper. Then 2 days later, you only have a 20% grade that you are going to earn. In the original, the written syllabus that you have in your workbook, it says per every week, and that's wrong. That's not the right thing. it should be each day. So I'm sure, I want to make sure that you understand this. So any paper that's late for 4 days, then you don't need to submit. Even if you do submit after like 4 days, then you're not gonna get any grade at all. Because the reason I'm doing this is I need to finish the grading within a week or two of the finishing of the last class and report that to the office. So it is mandatory that you need to submit at the last day of the class. Okay. The paper is basic research work, 10 to 15 letter size page, and then with the double space and the font size would be 10 at the Microsoft Office Word or any software that you're using, or to be size 10 font. The grading will be given according to that percentage that you have earned. It's simple, very simple. And you'll probably almost know your grade, except that the term paper that I'm going to give you the percentage, a total 40% at the best. Probably most of you will get a 30% or more. So adding to that, it's going to be A is 91 to 100 and so on. And then if you do less than 60, then you're going to fail this class. Sorry, but it's not going to be my fault, because it's predictable as long as you do the 10 points. Each attendance and that 10 key points paper will count you 3%, and it's easy to earn, and you'll know that you get at least 6%. So minding that, and that will be the grading class. So I expect you to do your best, because we are not seeing each other in person, not yet, and I hope that will happen soon. But until then, we gotta kind of adjust to this kind of format. It's not easy for both the lecturers and the students as well. I understand that, but I hope and pray that you will do your best to bring the best out of the situation. So I hope you'll focus on this lecture and have fun, and try to develop the understanding about doing history. Okay. Why don't we have a little break and come back and go into the actual class material. Okay. Okay, we are back, and let's continue. The prologue. As we begin this class, now the first thing first, when we say a modern church history, probably you're familiar with this Korean car maker Hyundai. Hyundai, it means I mean, it's actually a Chinese character term. It's Korean. Hyundai is Korean. I'm sure that it sounds pretty similar to Hyundai in Chinese, or a little different. But that Hyundai, it means modern. So how modern is modern? It's very, it's not an academic term to begin with. And, you can have a different understanding of what is modern. The people today, we kind of classify ourselves as a post-modern, which means after the modern. So post-modern is most current identification of our age, probably. And still, it depends on where you are, who you are, in deciding what the word modern means. For us, doing a church history, there are several different definitions about this modern period in church history. And the first, one of the popular, these are all the popular kind of definition of modern in doing any history, but particularly in church history, post-Reformation. So there has been Reformation by Luther in Germany, Calvin of Switzerland, and then Zwingli, also Switzerland, and so on. So we know that had happened in 1600 and so on. So there's a Reformation that's most modern and probably very significant, most significant kind of event or paradigm shift in Christian church history. So many scholars, just like the book that I quoted, I mean the secondary textbook by Gonzalez, the volume 7, it begins with a Reformation period and covers until the present. That's how the many Christian historians see modern to be. And then another idea and concept about being modern is 1900 and so on. World War started in 1918. And then prior to that, the reason that we have 1900 as kind of a landmark for church history is that's where the second awakening kind of begins. And for especially in American church history, which is very significant in the world church history. Many things that happened in America, North America, that's itself became kind of church history. It's funny that Major League, the baseball, are you familiar with the baseball? They called the fall season baseball as World Series, even though it happens within just American League. American League and National League, they call it World Series. It's kind of same kind of mindset as we look at the church history. Whatever happens in America has much significance toward a whole world church. It still does. We cannot deny that. And I think the official name for China is Junhua Mingu. In Korean we say Junhua Mingu, which means that China is the center of the whole world. I mean, that's the kind of mentality that we have. Sometimes it's healthy, but sometimes it's not. Same thing with this kind of Americanism. But still, as we look at the church history, there is a significant thing happening in 1906, which is the very beginning of 20th century. That's Azusa revival. Azusa is little north from here, right? About 40 miles north from where we are. This is Santa Ana, and then up north, if you just follow 57 and north, then you reach that Azusa, where actually that Azusa revival happened. So that's very significant event that happened in America that kind of starts or sparks the whole second awakening. Actually, there's more than second awakening. Then 1945 is kind of key year. It's the end of the Second World War, and then independence of some of the countries, and in 1948 the nation of Israel had been restored. So that 1945, plus and minus few years, there will be another landmark, which is World War II. It will be the landmark for doing church history. But we'll take the second one for our definition of modern. So thus, we'll just cover 20th century, about 100 plus years, plus and minus few years. Okay. And an overview, we'll do this. And as you see the charts on page 4 through 10 on your workbook, you'll see the kind of list of the things and the characters, the people, name of people. That's kind of in timeline or chronological order. That if you read that, and that gives you an overview to the very important major incidents, even though it does not list everything that had happened in church history, but it does include a very important, significant incidents and the people. So there are major historical events and major Christian events. And then there are major Christian characters that are listed as well. So we'll do that overview later on. And then this is just to show how we are going to do this. Now the major question of doing history. If you have already studied my couple classes prior to this one, that just world church history and then American church history, I did emphasize on how you are going to do the history. There are several different ways of doing history, how you approach history. And it has to do with philosophy and the perspective you should have as you do the history. And these are the things that you need to consider and to be concerned with. First, it says church history. And the church and history. Many people, when they do church history, they focus on the church itself. Nothing else. And how the denomination or particular kind of the church, local church, has been established, how it has been developed, and so on. So focus on the So that's a church. But doing church history and then doing church and history is two different things. What we want to do in this particular class is more include the general history, what's going on beyond the church. Would be significant for us to look at. So we not only read the church itself for the history, we are going to read the general human development and the narrative that we are in. The reason that I emphasize this is because many churches today, and it has been until today, since the beginning, many Christians are so focused to themselves, they kind of ignore to look at what's happening around them or beyond the church. And by doing so, as the result, as the consequence, the church is being separated from the history or the world. And church contents or is happy within itself and so focused on the running and managing and growing and nourishing the church itself. They are blinded to look at the outside the church. When that happens, church is no longer a church. See, I boldly, clearly say the church that is so focused to themselves is no longer a church. Because the church exists because there's a world. The church without the world, or church without the history, it's not a church anymore. And then, next question, how to integrate episode and characters. See, doing a history, any kind of history, whether it's a church history or some other history that you're doing in your classroom, in your education, there's always those episodes or events that had happened. That's how the narratives are. Human narratives, there's always something that happens. But it doesn't happen by itself. It doesn't happen alone. It happens with the people in it. And we say that characters. That's kind of narrative term. The characters and episodes. They are together. The doing history is how these characters are, caused or carried out, and then also concluded with that episode. See, no episode happens without characters, and no characters live without episodes. So it goes together, hands in hands. And we need to look at both of it, the episode and the characters, because characters are the ones who actually make up the episode. Then another formula to mind yourself or remember is people with time will bring the changes. That's what the history is about. The characters, when they are engaged with the time, when they interact with the time, when they're integrated with the time, it will bring the changes, whether it's positive, whether it's negative. So how do you determine, what causes this changes to be negative or the positive? It's going to be the people, the character itself. So as you do history, you don't just want to remember the names of these characters, when they were born and when they died. That's not that important. The date is just numbers. Those are just numbers. The important thing is who they are, what kind of people are they, what were their utmost intentions. See, these intentions are the key factors in understanding and doing history. So as you look at the people and the characters, I want you to see and try to read what their intentions were. There were like a visible intention and then hidden intention. Usually, what matters to historians, for us, doing a church history, is to look at their hidden agenda, the hidden reason, hidden motives that drives them to interact with the given time and source, the material, and also with the other people to bring the changes. But basically, if you look at every individual, including yourself, you are the ones who are going to interact with the given time. 24 hours a day. It's the same for every person on earth. Whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're a male, whether you're female, whether you're young or old, still, until you die, you are given 24 hours a day. Whether you're black, white, Asian, it doesn't matter. It's just the exact 24 hours. And some people use more hours than less, the others. Some people use less hours because they sleep more. Some use that given time to play and waste, while some people use that to be productive. See, that makes the difference not only in your personal life, when that is magnified by the number of people that we have on earth, that's going to become history. So historical change is the product of this group of people who are committed and engaged with the time that is given. And now you are given this, 21st century, September, and a certain day. I mean, the difference. Everyone live a different life with the same given time. So the question is, why would someone have a different life than others? Why some countries have different history than others? Why some church has a different narrative than others? And the question, the answer is the people. So any historians, good historians, would do research on these people, because they're the ones who bring the episode and then kind of formulate and create the whole narrative. Basically, the history is a narrative. And then ideality versus reality, or ideality interacting with reality is history. Human generation, whether it's a church or the general public, the secular sector, doesn't matter. This applies to any culture at any time. Every people, whether it's an individual or company or church or nation, they have something called this ideal and dream has to do with these are the things, the ideal, the vision and dream. That's what you want to achieve or have. So people or a person or nation or church without vision is like a dead animal, dead plant. It's dead, period. So think of yourself. Look at yourself. Do you have a dream or vision? Something that you are aiming at? Or something that has value? Another name for this is your motivation, or your intention, your purpose, goal. You can use a very different names for this. But you have to have something that you are going to achieve. That's ideal or ideality. When a person does not have that ideal and reaches a certain point that he or she is not really able to know that they are not, feel, not actually know. When they feel that he or she does not have any means or ways or possibility to reach that ideality. And then there's no reason to live. That's why many of these people commit suicide. So, I mean, it's natural for a human being, because we are created in the image of God and in the likeness of God. It is natural for us to have that, kind of imagination. It's just, the ideality is a sort of imagination, because it has not come yet. It may come, but it may never come. But it still has value, even though it does not come as a reality. But the problem as we do the history, what we are looking at is the reality. What reality had been, what it has been, and what it is now, and what the reality is going to be like. So there's always this, tension between the ideality and reality. And the history, we need to look at both of them, especially when you are doing a church history. Ideality, without having ideality, the reality does not mean anything at all, because the ideality for the church is the kingdom of God, and then the coming Messiah. As the Messiah Jesus comes back, he will restore, fully restore his kingdom, the God's kingdom, which is a perfect state of being. So for the language of modern people, the kingdom of God is perfect state of being. It's more than well-being. Well-being is good, but it's not still perfect. And the perfect state of being is the perfect happiness in our daily language. So the kingdom of God is people and the God being happy forever, without having the chance of being unhappy or unfortunate. See, the term shalom this biblical term, language of shalom, is the full and perfect, everlasting, absolute happiness. That perfect dynamic relationship between the beings, human beings, God beings. See, that's shalom. So the ultimate ideality for the church is shalom. And the reality is not so shalom. So what we are doing for the church, the narrative is to bring that reality close to ideality, the ideal, the dream of shalom. That's what the church is about. So when we are doing a church history, we are looking at the both church and the history, the church and the world. And the measurement, only measurement that is valid and necessary would be how much the church contributed itself or herself to bring that reality toward ideology of shalom. That's going to be our perspective. So history is always in between the reality and the ideology, and we want to look at both of them together. And then we'll continue. The integration. So another integration that we need to look at is kingdom history and the church history. I certainly I want to make sure that the kingdom of God and the church is similar, but it's not the same thing. Kingdom of God is bigger than church. Church is an agent for the kingdom of God. Kingdom of God is much bigger than the church, actually. And the kingdom of God is beyond the church. So church history and the kingdom history are two different subjects. But as we do the church history, we want to always mind ourselves about the kingdom, because the whole reason for the church to exist is for the kingdom of God. So kingdom of God is the ultimate ideal, while the church is the reality that we are in. The church on earth. The church on earth. Then church history and secular history. See, this paradigm is very important for us. Some people, some historians, and some church, the church historians, try to look at the church history versus secular history. See, verses or verse in short, abbreviation of verses are VS. See, these are against. It means against. Is the church against secular? That's the key paradigm. Two different paradigms. But I like to see church and the secular history, not the church history versus secular history. I believe the church history and secular history, whether you like it or not, it goes in hands. It has to go together. And it crosses each other every day. That's the reality. Reality does not separate church and the secular world. They are on the same track, going together, walking along. So you are not able to even separate. That's not possible. But some historians, some theologians try to separate this, which is not my perspective. I like to see this church and the secular history together, and integrate. So this class will try to integrate these things together, and we're not looking at only the church history, but we are looking at something much broader. Okay. I think time's up for today, this week, and I'll see you next week and continue on this subject. Thank you for listening again. See you. Bye-bye. 시작. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the second week of modern church history and a topical discussions. And last week we have seen, I introduced the class, the syllabus, and how are we going to approach this particular subject of doing modern history. We'll continue on the same subject, and today we begin by looking at understanding historical narratives. And I suggested 7W1H for, understanding any narrative. It could be your personal narrative, or if you are looking at the narrative in the Bible, for example, the story of the Gospels, how Jesus did live and how he did his ministry. When you look at those narratives, this will be the very useful tool, 7W1H. And even if you want to look at your own life, or as you progress your life every day, this will provide you a tool for analyzing what's going on every day, even an episode, because we are writing a narrative. See, you have your own narrative, I have my own narrative, and your narrative and my narrative comes together as we join in this particular class. So we're kind of interacting, and we're creating a narrative together. So personal narrative becomes a social narrative, and that social narrative may become something of importance. When it becomes something of importance, usually people want to look at it as the subject of history. So again, basically any history that we are doing, whether it's church history, American church history, or the modern church history, is the narrative about the church, or narrative of the church. And last week we have discussed that the church never, and it does not stand by itself. So looking at the church itself and only church for doing history would not be a valid one. We would rather want to look at the church and the surroundings, the world. How the church brings the change to its context, so to speak, its surroundings, to the reality. We want a church to be very ideal. The world is reality. And Jesus said, you are the light in the world. What is the light? It's ideality. As the world suffering and the dying. Jesus wanted them to look at the church, the ideality, to have hope, to dream. Oh, we want to be like a church that I see up on the hill that shines, and the happiness, the shalom. And that Jesus is the ideal. He's the ideality. He's the one who one should we look at, and the us Christians, the church should imitate ourselves just like Jesus Christ. That's why we call ourselves Christ and the eons. Eons means ones who imitate or who follows. So we follow Christ. We want to be like Jesus Christ. So Christ likeness is the key. So that's ideality. And we are going to look at this narrative of church from that perspective. And here's going to be the 7W1H of understanding a history. First, two W's, when and where. W number 1, W number 2 out of 7 W's. As we do the history, these are the factual, when and where. We need to know when it happened, where it happened. That's a way of doing science of history. Because history is not an art. It basically starts as a science. It's an academic discipline. So any academic discipline today, whether it's astronomy or whether it's chemistry, biology, or sociology, even the literature, there's a certain portion of science. And then there is some part of history that's artistic. It takes an interpretation. Interpretation is in the area of art rather than science. But before that, before doing the interpretation and implication and so on, that's another part of history, doing history. But to do so, we need to do this. That's fundamental. It's very basic foundation of history is to find out when and where. It provides you the information to be able to interpret and understand the history. So the background and context of the facts are important. That's why all the history requires you to be able to identify when and where. Then episode. There's a place and the time. And the place and time provided. And there's going to be people. But when the people are involved with the time and place, then it brings episode, events. Something has to happen. I mean, it does happen even if we sometimes if you do not want that happen, but it still happens because that's who we are. That's what the history is about. So first question: what had happened? What had happened there at that given time? See, that's one thing that we want to look at as we do the history, the church history. Then also it is important to know 1H. There was W number 3, then that's H. There's only 1H. Out of 7 W and 1H, this is the H. How? How did it happen? Okay, it happened. And how did it happen? See, many things in your life, it does happen. And you succeed. Sometimes you fail. Sometimes you get sick. And all these problems and troubles and needs and issues that we face, these are what happened. Something had to happen. So something that had happened, we need to know. And then you need to know, how did it happen? So that's kind of episode. And the people and characters. These are the people, person that are involved in the history. And the next W number 4 is who. W number 5 is why. Who and why. Actually, number 5 is who. Number 6 is whom, and then why. So number 4 and 5 and 6 there. Who did what to whom? When something happened and you want to ask who did to whom, we already looked at what, so that's small there. And who did to whom? Because sometimes there's the things that you do to yourself. But most history, the narrative, it involves more than one person, right? There's a main character or initiator or the leading person or the center character, or whatever you call it. There's a person of major role. Then there are people who plays minor role. And then there are people who does something, and then there are people who has been or had been affected by the things that another person do to that person. So you're going to be at the receiving end, and then there's a giving end. So giving and receiving. So who to whom? You need to look at these two characters. Who's doing what and what happened to other people. That's whom. And then the key thing, that will be the major question of doing history. Why did it happen? Why did it happen? The answer to that question is the key thing. Sometimes you don't know. Then you have to guess. You have to do educated guess. That's what the science is about. That's what the good historians do. You do the best educated guess on why. And you try to provide all the evidences to support your claim, your thesis, your understanding, your interpretation. So that's where the interpretation is involved when you try to figure out why. And that's going to be the key element in doing and understanding history. Especially when you do the church history, that why comes in the two areas. There's a human side and divine side. Human characters and divine characters. Divine characters are unseen. It's not visible. Human characters you can interview, you can ask, and they'll say, assuming that they'll say the right things and the honest things. But sometimes people they don't say honest things, and people sometimes say the things that they don't want to say, or they didn't even think about saying it. So, it cannot be 100% trust what they actually say. That's the problem with doing history. You cannot trust 100% of what they have said. They can lie, they can distort, they can twist, they can omit certain things, or they can add certain things. And also the memory is not perfect. Memory can be erased, added, twisted, and so on. So this is the human side. But still, you're going to ask them why this person did the things he or she did. And there is that divine aspect, divine domain. Why did it happen? Because of God. So when we say because of God, it's not sometimes. It's not, exclusive to certain particular events. We believe as Christians, He is always involved in history, especially in church history. Whether it's a good church history, whether it's a bad church history, divine presence is there. Divine involvement is there. So there's always, we assume, all good Christians, they assume that divine why, the reason, the intention is always there in human history, the church history especially. So our job as church historians is to try to figure out why did God allow that to happen sometimes, or God intended that happen. Sometimes God planned or enforced that to happen. Because as we read the Bible, as we understand our Christian lives, there are things God allows to happen. Even though He's not have any direct involvement. Sometimes God allows that to happen. And God sometimes designs and plans and executes something to happen. So that's two different things in this end and that end. But in between, there are something of that mixtures, which sometimes it's not very easy to understand or easy to discern. That's going to be the key word for us as we do the church history. We are trying to discern the God's involvement, the God's will. That's asking, why did it happen? What was the intention? What was God's plan? And that's very difficult part. It's not even art. It's beyond the science. And it takes a very mature Christian understanding or discernment, wisdom, to be able to discern what God's intention is, what God's plan is. That's what we are going to do, what we are trying to do. I don't think we can, never be perfect in making that discernment, but we'll try, keep trying, and get to a certain understanding.